you some samples of personal values assessments, and I'm hoping through these examples you can see yourself. So, so when you read your survey, you'll notice this is mine and this is my dot plot. And the first thing I want you to notice is the words that show up are in alphabetical order. The computer doesn't know which is your number one value, which is your number five value. They show up in alphabetical order. So just notice that. The second thing I want you to notice is that the number that corresponds to the word is the level the value is located. For example, wisdom is a level 7 value. So I just want you to orientate yourself to your dot plot by recognizing the words are in alphabetical order and what level that value is located. The next thing you're going to look at is you're going to look at, do you have any white dots? And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of surveys in a moment that have white dots and explain that a little bit further. But the white dots are potentially limiting values, and they will show up as a word with an L beside it on your list. Potentially limiting values aren't necessarily limiting you at this moment, but they can if they go unchecked. All right. And then the next thing I want you to notice, are there any empty levels in level 1, 2, and 3? And like I said, in a moment, I'm going to show you examples. Don't think you have to remember all these prods in this moment. But if there's empty levels in level 1, 2, and 3, it means one of two things. It's either handled in your life or it's a blind spot. So just note that, and I'm going to show you examples of individual assessments where it's handled and where it's a blind spot. And you might be able to see yourself in either of those. The next thing you're going to look at is if there's any gaps in level 5, 6, or 7. And this is your next step for growth. All right. So the next thing I want you to look at is where is the concentration of most of your dots? And mine you'll see are on level 7. And this makes perfect sense to me because I'm really in a stage of my life. I just turned 54, but I've been really focusing on legacy and the trail I leave behind. And those are 11-7 values, really about legacy, long-term focus, compassion, and vision. And I notice that's where a lot of my energy is being spent now. But let's look at how this shows up for other people. So when we look at Carson's results, you might see that he has more of a concentration in the lower 3 levels. This is grounded in developmental psychology. We grow in stages, we operate on levels, and we live in worldviews. And Carson is 26 years old. So he has a lot of values clusters at the very foundational part of the model. And that's just developmental. That's his age. He's building his empire, so to speak, finding his groove. And if we look at, notice the white dots. And these white dots, if I map them down to the survey, one is being liked, one is caution, and one control. So we can learn a lot by just looking at the words. I see being liked is a level 2 value, and he also has achievement and ambition as level 3 values. And just, I can make up a story in my mind about these that they could possibly conflict with each other. The value of being liked might get in the way of ambition. So he might be balancing these two values with, now that he's done a survey, he can do it consciously and recognize when it's appropriate. And then if we look at caution, caution is a level 1 value, and it could bump up against ambition. Because if he's overly cautious, he might be not willing to take risks. So I'm just making those stories up. It's up to him to decide what his story is. For example, how does Carson's value of control bump into his value of being liked? And it's really in the dialogue. And when you get people talking about values, dialogue is rich, juicy, and it happens very easily. This framework provides a context for deep, very transformational coaching conversations. So the next thing I want to show you, I do have more examples, but I want to show you how they play together in relationships. So you look at mine and look at Carson's, and we work very closely together. And if you see mine are mostly clustered at the top, and his are clustered at the bottom. So without us recognizing that we're in different stages in our development and we have different values, we could have some conflict. Carson might see me as living high in the sky and crazy, not understanding the things. Like, for example, I have a lot of ease with uncertainty. I don't concern myself with the future. I don't worry a lot about money. And sometimes that drives him crazy because he's really in his stage, he's developmentally here, and he wants more answers. So we can recognize the different places we are in our own development, and I can meet him where he is. And by me explaining what this means to me, he can see where I'm coming from. So juicy dialogue can result in teams, in relationships. Heck, do this with your partner, your wife, your husband, or your life partner. Do a personal values assessment and just see what comes up in the dialogue. So I'm going to give you a few more examples just to help you see yourself and see how differences show up in these simple personal values assessments. Here's another one. This was a young guy who's a sales guy that I met in a leadership class, a 4-year leadership management class at a university I was speaking to. His personal values, a lot on level 3. Level 3 is really about self-esteem. It's like feeling of self-worth. And if you look at the words he chose, achievement, ambition, being the best, competence, and excellence. Notice there's a lot of energy around level 3. And this is a guy who was in his mid-20s, if I remember correctly. And remember when I said, if you have an empty level, it's either handled or it's a blind spot. But I poked around and I said, tell me about your relationships, because this was blank. And what I noticed in our session is that no one partnered with him. He didn't talk to anyone, and he didn't seem to have a lot of friends. And this was a real breakthrough moment for him because he realized that he hasn't put any energy into relationships. And I suggested to him that in his own development, he might want to work on relationships, A, because he's going to be with these people for the next 4 years in a degree program, and B, if we don't have a strong foundation here, life up here is not sustainable. Level 7 is not better than level 1. It is developmental. We want to build into what's called full spectrum, where we have values on all 7 levels. So that's one example of a profile I often see. Here's another one. Notice a lot of cluster around level 2. Remember I said where are most of your dots? That's where most of your energy is in. Now, this person a recent empty nester. Lots of level 2 values, being liked, caring, family, friendship, respect. So a lot of level 2. And now kids have grown, and this woman is in her early 40s, mid 40s, saying, what's happening now? What do I do now? So in my coaching, I encouraged her to look at level 4, what interests you? What about this will serve you going forward? And what about this is it time to leave behind? And find internal cohesion. What are your passions? What really do you want? What do you want to do with your life? And then she can get really grounded in this, and level 6, make a difference from a place from the inside out. Often what happens with empty nesters is I'm talking specifically about women. Now, this isn't 100% true for everyone, but what happens is when the kids leave home, a lot of women go out and they just start volunteering. They want to be busy because they've been so busy. And then they find themselves overcommitted and nothing is aligned to their deeply held passions. So this model allows us to see where this person is right now and how can we move you to your next step of evolution. Here's another one. Now, this is an interesting plot. We have a lot of energy up here, but remember when I said if we don't have a strong foundation, this is the level 1, 2, and 3 is really the roots to the tree. If we don't have a strong foundation, this is not sustainable. And this value of being liked really stands out for me. It's potentially limiting. So this person is a person who does a lot of charity work, very kind, loving, and generous human. But you know what? Can't pay her mortgage. She doesn't have level 1 handled. Level 2, relationships are really about doing what other people want her to do instead of what she wants to do. Level 3, her self-esteem is tied up into service of others. So really working with this person to help her rebuild her level 1, 2, and 3. So this level 5, 6, and 7 is coming from a place of purpose and consciously designed. Here's another one. So this is an example of a man he was in his 50s. And a lot of his energy is in level 4. And I find women around 40, 45, men around 50 begin to look for meaning in their life. And this is a guy who we look at his personal image and reward, very important to him, level 3, where we build our empire. When he says, I spent my whole life climbing the ladder only to find it's leaning against the wrong building. So this person here in particular, the blank level 2 was really a blind spot. He wasn't really good. He didn't really have a lot of strong relationships, but was really seeking meaning in his life and was feeling like, okay, I've got this handled, but I need to move away from identifying myself with my job. So a lot of juicy coaching can happen just with these words and these conversations. So I hope you were able to see yourself just a little bit in your PVA.